Hello YouTube, back once again. Before we move to sequencing, I want to talk to you about warping. I'm not going to teach you how to warp because that's behind of the scope of this tutorial, and there are a lot of tutorials on warping around the web, so it's easy to find them in YouTube. But I'm just going to tell you about my approach to warping these clips. As you can see, I've already loaded the clips I sampled in the other videos. They're not the same. These are the ones I already had sampled and I already had warped, because there wasn't really no point in warping them again. So what I'm gonna show you is how I warp. Generally the beats, I always use the warp mode beats. Uh, you should use this one unless you you want to get it smeared and faded out, in case if you use complex or complex pro, it's gonna sound a little bit smeared and faded out, and they won't have the same punch. So you should use beats for beats. You could use repitch. Repitch is the best quality one, but in case when you warp it, if you have to stretch something too much, it will sound obviously repitched, and it's not that good. So I never use repitch. So for beats, I always use beats unless it's a really soft percussion with tones in it. Maybe I'll use, in that case, maybe complex or perhaps complex pro, but most time I usually use beats. Same for pacekeepers, because they percussive elements, so I generally use beats for pacekeepers as well. For riffs, I generally use complex, maybe complex pro if I hear that it's losing a lot of quality. If it's too much noticeable, the quality loss, I'll probably try complex pro. But I always tend to keep to complex, because complex pro uses more cycles, so I generally tend to keep to complex. Same thing as vocals. I think all my vocals to complex. I think the only exception is when I use the vocals in too repitched, even higher or lower, maybe at very higher tempos than the original, or very lower. In that case, I might use complex pro. I've used sometimes, but I generally tend to complex. Transitions kind of depends what transition is. This one is a tone, so I use complex. I normally don't lose time trying to figure out what's the better setting for every single one. I stick to complex, sometimes complex pro, and beats. About warping and marker placement, generally in beats I'll put one every beat. As you can see here, I have one every beat except the third beat, because there are no discernible beat here, so I won't put any marker on it. See, this is in double time, so it's in the middle of the beat actually. But if I go full time, it's on the beat 2 and 4. As you can see, this is a 4/4 pattern, so one every beat, same here, one every beat, one every beat where applicable. I don't use, even if the divisions on the beats are pretty clear, I never put warp markers on it, or it'll ruin the swing, so I'll just let them be. Same as here, there's more in the middle here that I won't warp, or it'll ruin the swing. Farthest I go is one warp marker in every beat, and except for vocals, I usually use one warp marker in every bar, except when it's too rhythmical. Maybe when it's too rhythmical, where sometimes when it has beats behind, or it's just too rhythmical, I'll use one every single one. Not that you really need it, because if you cut the samples like I showed you, it will always be on beat, except for minor variations. See, they're all on beat. except for minor variations, but I'm pretty meticulous, so I'll always try to warp it the best I can without like ruining the swing or the original groove. Also about warping, even though I never use repitch mode, sometimes I do repitch samples, and when I do it I use the transpose function. I do this because this way, using a warp mode and using the transpose function, I'll never detune it from the original, so I'll always have the samples in an exact key, whatever that was and whatever that it's going to become. So sometimes I want to transpose it. Maybe I have something like this one, which is 85 BPMs originally, and I'm playing it at 100 in this mix. If I wanted to transpose it to the pitch it would be if it was in repitch, I'll just figure out the difference between both, divide the original BPM to the new, figure out, or actually the new divided by the original, figure out how much more it is, and in this case it's almost 18% higher pitch than the original, and 18% is 3 semitones higher, because each semitone is 6% higher. If you increase your BPM like in 6%, you'll have 1 semitone higher pitched sound. The same goes for the other way around. If you decrease it 6%, your BPMs, you'll have a 1 semitone lower sound. In this case it's almost 18%, so rounding it up it would be 3 semitones higher. For this particular mix I haven't transposed it, I kept the original key, the original pitch, but this was just to tell you how I would do it. Maybe if I wanted to repitch it and keep the tuning, this is how I would do it. I use the calculator, figure out how much, or just try a value that I like to transpose it by. It doesn't need to be the same as the original repitching. And also when I use a very different tempo from the original, let's say like 60% higher tempo than the original sample, and I don't mind repitching it and I want to keep the quality, sometimes I just transpose it here so that it kind of keeps the quality, because if you don't transpose, the more you change the tempo from the original, the more you'll notice the warp method kicking in, and if you transpose it to kind of balance out with the changes in tempo, the quality will be better. It will be closer to the repitch mode, which has 100% quality. So about warping, that's all I wanted to say, I guess. Well, on to arrangement and sequencing. Okay, let's finally talk about arranging. By now you probably have some samples warped and ready to use, or at least cut in perfect loops, and you want to start arranging. You're gonna probably figure out. What I do is try to figure out what goes on with what in the session view of Ableton Live right here. Maybe I wanna work with a riff, and I'll just play it and pick some vocals and try different vocals on top of it, see which of them I like the most, and then move it here, and then try some beats, see what beats go well with this riff, maybe try transitions, etc, etc. And then when I find a couple of samples that go well together, maybe some vocals that go well with this riff, some beats, some pace keepers, I'll try to find a sequence for it in ways that it feels like somewhat like a song, that it has beginning and ending. And what I'm gonna talk now is about tension and release. It's every song has it, or in some way or another. Movies also have it. It's about creating tension and releasing it in some parts. And when you see in the movies, maybe he's going, oh wait, will he reach for the valve, or else will he suffocate, will he choke? And then it'll be creating tension and tension until he either reaches for the valve or suffocates, and that's the release. What happens in music is you generally create tension parts with verses, for example, and then release parts with choruses. It's about the balance of between novelty and repetition.